Hello, class. Hey, this is Dr. Do, and today we're going to talk about Jamaica Kincaid and her work, Girl. So I thought I'd start with a little lecture and then give you some ideas for writing, as per the usual. And while we're doing so, please feast your eyes on the lovely Jamaica Kincaid, who is from Antigua. And you should also think about some of the history of Antigua and post-colonialism there, because I think that you'll find a reiteration of the the beginning of the section on like contemporary literature. So go back and reread that, and then think of her in terms of like um, cultural oppression and post-colonialism. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on this. So, the body of advice that's narrated in Girl indicates some of the forms in which traditional cultural knowledge is frequently transmitted. So, when you think of the transmission of cultural knowledge, how do people learn the things that they learn? I always think of, how did I learn the cultural norms of being a white person in the United States and in the places where I've lived? So, and I think about some of the different cultural norms in the different places that I've lived. So, I've lived in Washington State in several places, I've lived in Las Vegas, Nevada, and then I've also lived in Oklahoma City in Oklahoma. And the cultural norms are very different between those things, from the way that people eat to their views of um, civil rights to the things that they do within a day. Let's kind of just use an example from Las Vegas. It's very normal for people to work from, say, 3 until midnight. It's very normal to work an overnight shift, especially in the casinos downtown. It's very normal in Las Vegas to drive for over an hour just to get to work. Um, and then if you shift to where I live right now, which is in Ellensburg, Washington, the cultural norms are very different. There's a lot more emphasis on vegetarianism here. I happen to be a vegetarian, so I know that. Uh, I would never drive an hour to get to work in Ellensburg. I walk for 15 minutes to get to my office. Um, there's a lot more of a different way of eating, a different way of addressing people than you would in like a larger city like in Las Vegas. And the way that these cultural norms are transmitted is in a couple of different ways. One is just by social observation. You can just look around a place and see what's going on. Another way would be to talk to people and ask what some of those things are. Normal conversation, like, so what is something that people do around here? I happen to have figured out that in Ellensburg, during the seasons, everybody watches the Seahawks play football. And I didn't learn that because somebody took me aside and told me. It was through observation over a very short period of time. I looked in the newspaper. So, and then a lot of times just through that direct transmission. So, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Hey, we're gonna go horseback riding, or we're going to go to a game, or we're going to go fishing, or we're going to go hiking. And then you learn what is normal for people in a particular area. There are exceptions, of course. I mean, not everybody goes hiking every weekend. But you do kind of get a general sense. In Jamaica Kincaid and Girl, this is a direct transmission of, or an attempted direct transmission of knowledge from someone who apparently could be a mother figure or an aunt or grandmother and a child who is probably coming of age. By coming of age, probably she's a young adult or she has recently begun menses. So the advice comes in the form of explicitly stated directions. So, like on 11:45, she says, "Don't walk bareheaded in the sun," or "This is how you set a table for dinner with an important guest." That's on 11:46. And then there's parental guidance through knowledge of this particular child. Is it true that you sing Benna in Sunday school? So, and I don't know if the child told this person that or if she's just heard it from other people or if she just suspects this. Bena, by the way, is a form of Antiguan folk music, and it usually has like sexual and political themes, and then it's which may make it appropriate for Sunday school. So, in combining all of this stuff into a brief narrative, the forms of cultural transmission and education, Jamaica Kincaid indicates the vitality and the strength of the Antiguan culture, even if at the same time she indicates like certain contradictions. And we'll talk about those contradictions later. So, as is evident in the many prescriptions in Girl that relate to public behavior, don't walk bareheaded in the sun, that sort of thing. The Antiguan culture had a great influence on social interactions between its members. Um, and it similarly guided the private lives of people in like comfort and in hygiene. Part of the artistry of this story then is it's kind of in this very, very brief work. She just definitely illustrates the vigor of the culture of Antigua and its various modes of preservation and transmission. I mean, you can get so much from this. You can learn so much about one culture just from reading this prose poem. So let's talk about those contradictions there. So the speaker of Girl, who could be mother, grandmother, aunt, or just a woman in the street, who knows? Um, she offers advice that is sometimes given in this contradictory spirit. And there are moments of apparent opposition, and they don't just invite the reader to question the authority of the speaker, but it illustrates the shifting nature of the advice, and that maybe this is given over an extended period of time. So in transmitting culture, it doesn't just happen in one day. You can get a feel for Paris by visiting there, but unless you've been there for some time and people have taken time to directly tell you things, you're just not going to get that in a day. So I think that that's a good point. The most apparent example is in relation to sexual advice given by the speaker. The speaker refers three different times to what she calls the slut you are so bent on becoming. It's on 1145. She cautions the girl, the listener, about a certain care and modesty into relation to how she walks, how to hem her dress. It's on 1146. And how to behave around men who do not know her well. Also on 1146. In contrast to this cautious kind of social attitude, the speaker teaches the private techniques of abortifacient concoctions, which is on 1146 also. This is how to make a good medicine to throw away a child even before it comes a child. And the sexual knowledge is kind of implied in when she says, this is how to love a man. The contradictions that are implied between the private and the public behavior of the listener who's being advised should prompt the reader, that's you, to question the authority and the wisdom of the speaker. It's like, God, who even is a speaker, and how well does she know the girl? So the primary speaker of Girl is interrupted twice by the listener. And both of these interruptions are kind of essential to understanding the tensions in this story. The first interruption, the girl says, "But I don't sing Ben on Sundays at all, and never in Sunday school." And that's responding to that suggestion by the speaker. Is it true that you sing Ben on Sundays? Gosh, what a mean lady. The second interruption is unlike the first, as the listener doesn't really attempt to correct the speaker, but she's asking for clarification. But what if the baker won't let me feel the bread? And then the speaker's response to that question is to rebuke her for being too timid. And I think that's an interesting contrast to this suggestion that she's too bold in singing Ben at Sunday school. So both of these interruptions also imply that the speaker doesn't know the listener as well as she thinks. For while she's quite loquacious, she does not actually have knowledge of the worries, temperament, and character of the one person that she is attempting to advise. Makes me wonder about the nature of knowledge and who really has wisdom anyway. Um, So that's kind of some ideas on what's going on in Jamaica Kincaid's Girl. I have some ideas for you for writing. One of the things that you might want to do is do a reader response in which you kind of react to that narrative style of Girl. How did the mother's direct address to you, as if you were her daughter, affect your understanding of the story? Did it reinforce any of the major themes of this story? So you'd want to talk about the major themes. And then, how would you respond if this person was speaking directly to you? How old do you think these people are? And what do you think that um, that mother figure sort of, what is she trying to do here? What is her relationship with this child? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it well intentioned? Because it seems like she gives her advice, but she doesn't seem to think that the girl is smart enough to take the advice. So it's like, hey, don't do these things. Here's how to love a man. Don't be the slut that I think you're bent on becoming. But I don't think that she thinks she's going to take the advice because she's like, this is how to abort a child. So it's like, gosh, what are you really telling this kid? Um, so my second question then would be, how do you classify the mother's advice? Is it nurturing and supportive? Is it condemning and admonishing, or is it both? So what does the nature of the mother's advice tell you about growing up as a woman in Antigua? Because it doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun to me. Sounds like a whole lot of double standards to me. And you could actually compare that to coming of age in the United States if you were so inclined. I also found a quote by Jamaica Kincaid. Um, She says, and using research on the history of colonization in Antigua, she says, I've come to see that I've worked through the relationship of the mother and the girl to a relationship between Europe and the place I'm from, which is to say, a relationship between the powerful and the powerless. The girl is powerless and the mother is powerful. The mother shows her how to be in the world, but at the back of her mind she thinks she'll never get it. She's deeply skeptical that this child could ever grow up to be a self-possessed woman, and in the end she reveals her skepticism. Yet even within the skepticism is, of course, dismissal and scorn. So it's not unlike the relationship between the conquered and the conqueror. So that's what Jamaica Kincaid said herself. I think that's very, very powerful. And I kind of hope that that guides your interaction and discussion this week. Another question that I guess I would ask is, what genre does this fall into? What genre does Girl fall into? Is it a poem? Is it an essay? Is it flash fiction? Is it prose poetry? Look at those different constructs and then tell me which one you think it is and why. I think that's kind of a fun. She kind of bends the genre on purpose, and I think that that's a really good thing to do. Um, and then finally, I was thinking about the accepted cultural oppression against women in Girl. Uh, and I would think of this in terms of the oppression, the cultural oppression of women in general. Think of the other stories that we have read, and you can compare the way that women are oppressed in this to the way that women are oppressed in other stories. All right, well, I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you have any questions, let me know, and enjoy reading Jamaica Kincaid's Girl.